to this We on Wellness Day. I just want to give you an opportunity for everybody to hear from you. Just introduce yourself.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Rachel. You can call me Dr. Rachel because there are 3 other Dr. Knoxes, Doctors Knox. In my family, we are Doctors Knox or the Knox Docs. And I am so happy that I said yes to TEDx Portland. And so almost 2 years ago, I was asked to talk about cannabis in a new way. And I was like, I can do that because nobody's talking about the endocannabinoid system. And, my family entered this space as not cannabis doctors, but as endocannabinologists, because we recognize that doctors are doctors of human bodies and not of plants. Plants absolutely should be tools, probably the first tools in our arsenal of tools to address disease and illness. But it was really the endocannabinoid system that we medical professionals, from chiropractors to neurosurgeons, need to understand. And we still believe that for those of us in this conventional system to start to chip away at the stigma, we're going to have to lead with science. When we thought about our own medical education, we recognized that we began with anatomy. And from anatomy, we went to physiology, and from physiology to pharmacology. We didn't start with the plant. And what's really interesting is that when folks from my conventional Western medical world hear the science, it's almost like that veil just lifts off. The outer hard shell just peels away, and all of a sudden we're much more open to cannabis. So we're endocannabinologists. We run the American Cannabinoid Clinics. We also educate other licensed medical providers on the endocannabinoid system and cannabis as medicine through Advent Academy. And these days I spend most of my time, though, talking about health equity and advising regulators and policymakers on a more equity-centric regulatory system for cannabis, because cannabis is first medicine. So can we please regulate with integrity so that our end consumers, which 1 in 1.5 adults in the United States of America actually is sick with something. So I actually call consumers patient consumers or just patients.
Yeah.
That's the only way we're going to ensure that this economy of cannabis truly serves us as end consumers. It's recognizing that cannabis is medicine. You can make multiples of billions of dollars off this plant, but just do one thing: run this economy with integrity and make sure that at the end of the day, we have viable medicine, on shelves.
Those are all really, really important things that you've said. So I just really would like to just go back to what you said about health equity. And really, we talk about the we in wellness.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe if you could say a little bit about how an individual, right? Like I am one individual person who may or may not be a patient. How can I use my voice in order to support the kind of work that you're doing with health equity?
Yeah. One, we have to, I'm adamant about this. We need to move from using the phrase social equity to using total equity, which we use synonymously with health equity, right? The health of a person or a community or a society is just a state of being, for better or worse, right? And it's better or worse depending on how we create the infrastructure and the inputs, right? When I see a diabetic in front of me, they're not just diabetes. I can't just treat them with metformin and insulin. That's what we do in the conventional world, but then we send our patients back home into their ecosystems, their environments. That might be food deserts, right? There might be mold in the home. They might not have a job, or if they do, maybe they can't save, right? Those are all inputs that at the end of the day determine how healthy a person is, or how healthy a community is, or how healthy a society is. So when we start to think about the effects of selective enforcement of marijuana laws in our communities, right, that drove what percentage of our community behind bars, then we can say, yeah, marijuana laws caused the intergenerational marginalization and disinvestment in our communities to the tune of creating the health disparities that we see today, the health disparities that COVID-19 just illuminated. Like, we knew they were here all along. And so for me as an advocate, we need to be talking about using the whole plant and its whole economy for restitution, right? Cannabis is medicine, but it's also industrial. It's also nutritional. How can we use the innovations of cannabis and ensure that we're regulating so that the whole 100% of the plant can be utilized to create healthier environments for ourselves? I mean, y'all know we can make clothes out of cannabis. We can make biofuel out of cannabis. We can build cars out of cannabis. We can build homes out of cannabis. We can clean our soil, our air, our water with cannabis. At the end of the day, those are all things that impact our health. And then we can also use it as medicine, right? That's how I want us to start thinking about, and us meaning Black and brown people, how we should start demanding that cannabis serve us at the end of the day. Yes, we want it. We want access to cannabis as medicine too. And I don't care if you enjoy it. I don't care if you want to recreate with it, but it's not a recreational substance. It's a medicinal substance that you can recreate with. But we have to recognize that from that root, the root of the cannabis plant, people stop throwing it away. Please, there are phytonutrients in those roots that are also medicinal. Like, I have patients who have ground up their homegrown cannabis root, and they use that to treat the arthritis in their hands. We need to be using the whole plant. We need to make sure that our regulators understand that the whole plant is viable, it has utility. Our policymakers, everybody's trying to regulate the vice of marijuana, right? To all of our demise, really, at the end of the day, the opportunities are endless. But we really do have to get these regulators and legislators above them to understand that we need to no longer regulate from a fear-centric space and regulate for the opportunity that cannabis brings us to actually create healthier ecosystems. That's the story we need to be talking about. We need cannabis to heal the communities. I like to say we need to take cannabis from weaponization to assetization in our communities.
Can you say that one more time for the folks? Make sure to
Yes, we need to take cannabis from weaponization to assetization in the Black and brown communities that have been harmed the most through cannabis prohibition.
Wow, I agree. And where do I go from that? That was that was such a comprehensive answer. Thank you so much for that. I think, I'm going to ask you something personal, right? Because since we're sitting and talking, I often, I talk to Fame, my other co-host, a lot. She has a campaign about ending the stigma in our own Black community. I mean, you talked a little bit about using, I have doctor friends too. They'll say, is that evidence-based medicine? Like, they kind of ask that. And that makes sense for the healthcare professionals and all of that. But like my aunties and an uncle or two of mine who still, they really don't want to hear all of the stuff. They can't pronounce endocannabinoid system. What do you think would be the most helpful approach for someone like me who knows that they're taking all of these medications that they can't make sense of, but that they still have this internal stigma about what cannabis is? What would you say to us? Yeah. Is there a point of conversation? Yeah. Or is there a way to bridge? What do we do?
A couple of things. One, I think we need to start talking a lot more loudly about the minority health disparity gap that exists within the conventional. We don't even have to talk about cannabis. We need to illustrate to ourselves that the conventional system, the chronic care system, is not healing us. It's actually harming us, right? We're treated worse when we get into this system than everyone else, and our outcomes are terrible, terrible. We need to take our health back into our own hands. And so we need to start recognizing, even if there's not an alternative, which there is, but we need to start recognizing that the medical system as we know it is not serving us. It wasn't created to serve us, and it's not today. And I just want us to sort of tear apart, and this is for everybody in the United States, tear apart the image of healthcare which is tied to medical care, and those aren't the same thing. Like, I'm a medical doctor who provides medical care in a medical system, right? In a clinic or in a hospital. Healthcare happens everywhere else. 365 days a year, 24/7, wherever you're at, you're making choices that are beneficial or harmful to your health, right? Or we have systems that are doing that for us. So we need to like tease apart that the healthcare system as we know it from ourselves, right? We have to recognize that at the end of the day, we do have some accountability, even if we sit in a food desert. I need to use my voice. I need to go down to City Hall and demand that something socially change so that we can have healthy food in our community too. And then we bring in cannabis. And this is where it's really important for Black and brown medical professionals to stop asking, is that evidence-based? There is more science on the endocannabinoid system, on cannabis and cannabinoids than any drug on the face of this earth, on any physiological system. Like, I think we're at 21,000 peer-reviewed articles that have a long time ago demonstrated the efficacy and safety of cannabis medicine. And I say that we need more Black and brown medical professionals to figure this out and to join this conversation, because we need us to go into our communities as the trusted medical providers to have these conversations with us, right? We don't need the white doctors doing it. And we certainly can't be the ones continuing to cast doubt on the evidence. And this is, my sister said this the other day, and I was just like, we have been convinced that a medicine is poison, right? While we willingly accept drugs that are poison, while those same people who have been telling us this lie this entire time are the first in line to benefit from cannabis now, while we're over here still under the veil of stigma, unwilling to use cannabis as medicine when these 20 pharmaceutical drugs that I'm taking are actually making me sicker, right? It's one hell of a drug, yeah. All that propaganda, it really is. But that's what it's going to take. It's going to take all of us, from the high school student to the licensed medical professional, right? To start having comprehensive, like you said, comprehensive and intellectual conversations about the real about cannabis. And even in medical conferences, my family starts to talk about cannabis to licensed medical professionals through going through the history, like my TED Talk. We start with the history because we need to understand that cannabis was medicine. Still is, but it was. And it didn't become illegal because of science, because there was any proof that it was harmful. It was purely economic and political. And unfortunately, still today, the racist sentiments at the time just provided them the right catalyst to get the masses to rally behind prohibition. That is it. A lot of medical doctors don't even know that cannabis was in our pharmacopoeia. And again, like, when people hear the truth, light bulbs turn, and people will go from, staunch prohibitionist to avid activist, and I was never a prohibitionist ever. Like, I was just going through the world, going through the motions, becoming a medical doctor. I had patients in North Carolina where I trained who used cannabis. I didn't know even then to ask, what are you using it for? But I didn't berate them for their use. But when I, as a Black doctor, learned about the history, I was pissed. I was pissed off. Because one, I'm Black, and this plant, this medicine was weaponized against people who look like me, against my people, that has caused violence and destruction in our community. Y'all did that. But two, you took a viable medicine out of our system that could have saved lives. So as a medical doctor, you're not going to teach me the most important system, and still today, it's not core curriculum at medical schools. Like, to me, I call that negligent homicide. I do. The prohibition of cannabis has murdered people. And I like saying it that way, because yes, it's provocative, but it's true. It is true. I used to call it, and I haven't had the opportunity for a long time, but I used to say it, this is probably the greatest crime against humanity, taking the substance out of circulation, and then doubling down by weaponizing it against people. Yeah. But the history, to answer your question again, we need to tell the whole story in both sides of it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember Sheeta Dawson. She did like a presentation where she talked about like this back 6,000 years ago, and all of that stuff and that's it's really helpful to see that. Hopefully we can kind of get like some more infographics and some things like that can push that stuff out there, because there's so much, like you said, reefer madness and propaganda and things that people just keep like whispering down the lane through generations, right?
Like, it's gonna have to both sides. You're gonna have to show, listen, this is our communities on Western pharmaceutical drugs. This is our community on cannabis. I think that's the way we're gonna have to lay it out to those in our community who would benefit from it the most, but who, at their own expense are unwilling to consider that cannabis is a safer alternative. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I have, let's see, I'm looking now. I wanted to see if there was any questions from folks. Folks were really just repeating on some of your great points here. If there is any other questions, I don't know what your time is, like today, I will forward any questions that folks might have for you. Folks can put it here. If there's any other questions that we might have for Dr. Rachel of the Knox Docs family and the American Cannabinoid Clinic, please pop them in now. And let's see, how can we end? What's your favorite wellness self-care practice for yourself, Dr.
Oh man, my favorite. They're all my favorite. They're all my favorite. Let me see. Let's see. On a good day, my routine is typically wake up. I give gratitude to God. I thank Jesus for the grace that I received. I do some reading. I'll either read like a devotional, read some pages in the book. I will do some deep breathing and drink some water, which I have here. And I do use cannabis as medicine. I practice what I preach. My favorite method of consumption, though, is an inhaler, which is COVID responsible.
I'm glad to hear that, because that's my favorite too.
COVID responsible. But yeah, aerosolized products they're coming onto the market, which so in conversations,
we haven't seen that on my side of the world yet. That's still coming. No, but I've seen them. So it's good to know that's there. Oh, we got a question. Oh, of course, Jane Green, always with the great questions. She asked the question, what state has the best medical cannabis program in your opinion? Excellent question.
None. Okay. Yeah, no, for the record, and I know I should be offering grace too, and understanding that sort of we're doing the best that we think we can, but I don't think we're doing the best that we can. I'm from Oregon, and we were among the second round of states that legalized, right? California in 96, and then we had a few in 98, which included Oregon. And I will tell you, these states that have legalized medical, they kind of did it because they had to. Like, might as well, people are using it and they're clamoring about it, like, let's do it. But what's been really unfortunate about the states that legalized medical early is just that. They didn't take the time to recognize that we should be studying, we should be tracking from seed to outcome, right? How beneficial is it, or is it not? Like, these states cannot answer those questions because they did not infrastructurally create a medical program designed to extract data from. right? And so these days I'm saying states, if you're a virgin state and you have not legalized yet, legalize medical with an IRB. Like treat it like a true research project or research program. Track this data and do it.
What's IRB? I'm sorry.
It's a institutional review board, okay. Right? And so when you have that, you can now publish data. With an IRB, you can publish data because an IRB is also ensuring that, you know, research is being done ethically and appropriately. So when you have that as your floor, now you can publish data that will be respected, right? And this is data that is useful to not just regulators or policymakers or industry. It's also useful for universities and research centers. So that's how you gotta think about legalizing. Legalize with some integrity, with some intentionality. And in that same medical program, call it a pilot, right? Now you have a pilot and you've created this ecosystem, the supply and demand chain, right? You have a population that you've identified as appropriate for use. That's your medical patient population. And now you can process improve. And when you, the state, decide that you want to rev up some tax revenue by legalizing adult use, just expand the industry that you've already ensured is sustainable and scalable. Now you can open up other license types, particular license types that yes, do favor people of color, and allow adults over 21 to purchase medicinal cannabis too. They can all recreate with it for all that I care. If you're a patient or a consumer, it doesn't matter, but you have ensured that you have developed a seed to outcome, supply and demand ecosystem that is built for scalability and for the benefit of your state, right? Benefit all the people in the state, the betterment for the industry, your operators, right? Right now, I mean, people are scared because this industry is not stable. Well, it's not stable because you didn't set it up to succeed. So so again, long answer. I do that. I have not yet seen a medical program that actually truly serves patients in a sustainable and scalable way. And that's really, we know too much to let that happen these days. There's too many smart people, you know, at the helm for that to happen. There's no excuse in my opinion, but I think states are unfortunately replicating the bad habits of states that have come before them. You know, and until a state says, you know, we're gonna do this differently, I don't think we're gonna have a well-executed medical program.
Gosh, that's so interesting that you say that, because a little bit I know about sort of how, you know, they talk about folks not being able to enter the cannabis industry because they don't have a vertically integrated set of things. Like, it's like, well, you guys don't have a vertically integrated assessment process is what it sounds like you're saying. And so it's like they're expecting like all of the money over here, but none of the accountability over there. It's
so unrealistic and it's not sustainable. It's not. And we see states like Washington and Oregon and Colorado now saying, oh, we need to do something differently. Like, do we need to scrap it and start over? The answer is yes, we do. And you need to start over with, I said, equity centric, but also patient centric, right? Medicinal centric. Cannabis is medicinal the way, you know, we've legalized it. Like, hemp is here now and we can start talking about all the other non-medicinal innovations. And that's great because it does play into health equity too. But I know in Oregon, we're actually drafting an equity bill because Oregon went a long time ago, right? Before it was in vogue to talk about social equity. And so we are writing our equity bill this year, and I could not be prouder of what we have conceived. We're creating new license types for Black and Brown people, and we've explicitly stated Black, Indigenous, and Latinx in our language. We're identifying the population we want to serve, and we're going for it. So creating new license types, creating. What else are we doing? Oh, yes. Carving out cannabis tax revenue out off the top to go towards community and reinvestment, criminal justice reform and all of that. So yeah, I'll be excited when it's public because I do think it's probably one of the best equity bills that I've seen. But the hindsight being 2020, we've been able to observe and learn from what hasn't been going so well in other states. So yeah, what we have is pretty special, and I'll be excited for us to share it in short order.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Rachel. I hope that some folks that are connected to our Pennsylvania Governor Wolf will send him this whole chat that we just had, because I think he's proposing, he's like trying to push the gun, and he's like, let's distribute out of state stores and all this kind of stuff. I just want to send this love letter to him so that he can really think through before he, jumps the gun, as you said.
I'll say one more thing then. The departments of health need to be involved somehow, some way, right? Because we need to talk about the criminalization of drugs and the mental and behavioral health consequences that is caused in our community. So some of this cannabis tax dollars should be going to mental health and behavioral health treatment for Black and brown people too. All of these systems have a part to play, and none of them should be let off the hook. Like DOJ, CPS, departments of health. I think they all need to participate in the regulatory system of cannabis, to the tune of improving it, not to continue to be barriers.